and welcome to this Royal Television Society online event, a joint event between RTS Midlands and RTS East. It is great to have your company this evening. My name is Rosanna Tennant and I will be your host this evening for our panel discussion about F1 on screen. And we have some great guests on our panel to talk you through the evolution of broadcasting when it comes to motorsport and F1 more precisely. Now, before I introduce our panelists, just a couple of points in terms of housekeeping. So we are recording this evening's panel, which actually makes it much easier for you to dip into at a later date. It'll be going up on the RTS website, so watch out for that. And of course, we'd love you to get involved this evening as well, asking lots of questions to our expert panelists. So there's a Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. Put your questions in there and I'll put them to our experts. Finally, there's going to be a lot of information shared this evening, perhaps some opinions. We are following a Chatham House rules situation, so I'm sure you're all aware what that means. You'll hear a lot of information. You're free to share that information, but no names or sources are to be shared after the panel has ended. Just take that information away and use it wisely, shall we say. So let's get into this evening's panel then. I'm delighted to be joined by three incredible assets to the Formula One paddock. I'm joined by Dean Locke, Director of Broadcast and Media at Formula One. Ted Kravitz, who I'm sure a lot of you have seen on screen with Sky Sports F1 and W Series, and he has had a long, long career in the motorsport world and broadcasting world, and I'm sure we'll hear all about that very shortly. And finally, Alex Jacques, Channel 4's commentator. I've worked with Alex both in the commentary box and in the paddock, so I can't wait to hear his opinions on where we are when it comes to F1 and broadcasting. A very good evening to you all, guys. We're going to start with you, Dean. As Director of Broadcast and Media at Formula One, I'm sure you've seen it all when it comes to broadcasting motorsport. Tell me where your journey in the sport started and what role you held at that point.
I started at Formula One in '97, so I'm coming up for 25 years, which is quite incredible, really. I only thought I'd go for a couple of years and see the world. So 25 years, I've seen it in various guises and various ownerships, actually. So I started as a researcher, working for FOA or FOA, I think we were then, for Bernie Ecclestone, very, very small team. And then we went in to do a digital output and assist with the host broadcast. And then that changed around 04, 05 when we became the host broadcaster for the majority of the events and then nearly all the events. And predominantly working on that, and then later across all media products. So all media products for F1, whether that's broadcasting, apps, or our F1 TV outputs.
Absolutely, the landscape has changed significantly, and as you mentioned, just more and more platforms and more content being created by Formula One and all the teams that you preside over. We will dig a little deeper into all of that a little later on, but thank you for that very whistle-stop tour of your 25 years in Formula One. Let's move to Ted Kravitz. As I said, lots of you will know Ted from Sky Sports F1, but Ted, where did you get into broadcasting? Why did you get into it? What was it about that appealed to you at the time?
Well, hello, Rosanna. Hello, everybody. Yes, thanks for having me, and thanks to RTS East and thanks to RTS Midlands for organising this. Well, I mean, I started in radio. That was really always what I wanted to do, and had the good fortune. Formula One was always my passion. Like I'm sure yourself and Dean and Alex and many people watching. And I never thought I'd get to work in it, but then an opportunity came about. I was working for Capital Radio when back in '96. Went to an Arrows press conference at Chelsea Harbour and met one James Allen, who was together with ITV's new coverage of Formula One coming in 1997, got talking, got a job with the ITV production crew. And then when James replaced the late great Murray Walker in the commentary box, I took James's position full-time from 2002. And I've been pit lane reporter and general person who goes on a bit. I'll have to keep my answers brief, Rosanna, because my job is essentially just to talk for a commercial half hour for 24 minutes non-stop. So I'll try and keep it brief.
That makes you the perfect panelist. That's perfect.
No.
That's what we're
So
after.
I've done more or less the same thing since 2002 for ITV Sport, for BBC Sport, for Sky Sports now, and a bit of W Series as well, as you mentioned.
Well, I think that's a fascinating thing. You may have done the same thing, but I'm sure in very different ways, and the methodology has changed, I'm sure, during your tenure in Formula One. And finally, we'll bring in Alex Jacques. Good evening to you, sir. You've worked with me in F1 with the Formula One management side of things, commentating on the feeder series and F1, and now you're with Channel 4. Just tell me a bit about your journey into actually starting commentary as your full-time job.
Well, I started with BBC Local Radio, taking any sports shift I could get. And then I moved to the Times newspaper when I deluded myself I was going to be a print journalist for a bit. And then an opportunity came up to do what was then GP2 and GP3. And I found myself in a rather intimidating boardroom with Mr. Locke, in fact, talking about why I'd be a great fit to replace Will Buxton, who had just given the roll up. And as you said, I did that for a long time. I did that up until the end of 2020. And I still commentate on Formula 2 now. And then the opportunity with Channel 4 came along to do Formula 1 week in, week out. And yeah, a lot of exciting projects along the way as well as sharing a commentary box and pit lane and paddock with you. So sorry you've had to deal with it, but there you go. There's the whistle stop tour.
Well, the pleasure has been all mine. So there we have it, 3 experts to talk us through the landscape when it comes to Formula 1 and broadcasting this evening. Just a reminder, it's Dean Locke, Ted Kravitz and Alex Jacques. If you've got a question, pop it in the Q&A function and I will be looking at that throughout our panel this evening. So Dean, I'm going to come back to you because there has been an explosion of interest when it comes to Formula 1, and a lot of people put that down to Drive to Survive, the Netflix series that launched back in 2019. Seems crazy that we've had 4 years now of enjoying this behind-the-scenes look at a sport that we all thought we knew pretty well until the guys at Box to Box got their hands on it. And I just wondered what that has meant for you in terms of broadcasting and potential rights holders and other media outlets around the world coming to Formula 1 and showing more interest.
I think you're right. The fan base is growing hugely. I think Drive to Survive has a big part of that. I think it's lots of incremental things. We've also had some really good championships. We've been on some, we've got some brilliant broadcast partners that are putting a lot into it. Ted works with Sky, Alex works with Channel 4, but across the world, recently ESPN in America, sort of putting their shoulder behind it. And so the fan base has grown. And we're seeing, a lot of younger fans across. We had some records in Australia of female young fans attending the events. The events are all sold out as well, which is a, huge, because that also looks good on TV. They're not there just to have a good time. They're also there a backdrop for TV. But
so Director Phil has something to cut to.
Exactly. So yeah, I think lots of incremental things that have brought Formula 1 and also just being around. We weren't that big in the digital space 5 years ago, hardly at all. So with the acquisition from Liberty, big drive to do that. We built the OTT platform. And a lot more activity in the digital space, and also bolt-ons like esports and things like that as well. Covering Formula 1. So covering Formula 1, that slightly changed it because I guess you've got a very diverse viewership. You've got a very casual fan. You've got new fans, and then you've got the very entrenched fan that get really, really excited about strategy calls in the midfield battles and difficult things that are very hard to explain, that Ted and Alex do a very good job of, and we just have to supply the picture sometimes. But a good example of that is a graphic. Formula 1 is very difficult and complicated to show, and the graphics in particular can be difficult, and lots of numbers. We're 80 broadcasters, 200 territories, I think we are. So lots of multiple languages as well. So designing a graphic that a casual fan can understand, and then maybe there's a bit more depth to it that a more entrenched fan that wants to understand as well. That was always the challenge. I'm not sure if we always meet it. Sometimes the graphics still look quite complicated to me. But that is definitely, we've had that sort of ethos all the way through, that you should be able, but it's even more important now to be able to do that and cover it in that way that everybody can understand. I think we're very embracing, sports broadcasting generally is anyway. And us being Formula One, and most of my bosses ex-technical pioneers of Formula One, most of the time they're asking for new stuff and things that people haven't done before. So we're quite quick to trial new things and different elements to broadcasting, and very active in that way.
Yeah, no, it's looking great. A lot of real estate on that screen, and you guys are doing a good job at filling it, while, as you say, Ted and Alex are talking us through it as well. Ted, obviously Sky is a subscription platform, and you're going to have a very discerning fan, as Dean mentioned, very into the technical side of it, the strategy and what's going on in the garages. You're also going to have casual fans, even though it's a subscription service, they just might want to watch the Grand Prix. And I always think back to watching you, I think was with a spoon, explaining the Coanda effect. And I love those explanations, trying to make technical concepts very sort of digestible for your casual fans. How have you found it's changed over the years? And I suppose budget allows you to do some great experiments and show some things on screen, but how does Sky approach it? Because obviously you take a lot from F1, but what do you guys add to it?
Well, I guess it's just the best way to describe exactly what's going on, really. The best way that you can, sorry, can you hear me, Rosanna? You can?
Yes, perfect.
Yeah, you can hear me, good. It's just the best way that you can find to describe what's going on, to illustrate it. So yeah, in the time when exhaust plumes were being directed out in some kind of imaginary and invisible curve by the Coanda effect to power some downforce on the top of a diffuser. We showed that with a spoon and a tap at the back of the Barcelona paddock and pit lane. But, you know, and we'll find whatever way we can, whether it's technically complex or quite simple, just to explain what it's like. So last weekend in Canada, for example, I lowered a skateboard to within about an inch, which is the ride height of a Mercedes, and then was pushed at 20 miles an hour. I wanted to go at 200, but couldn't, down some tarmac to see what the bouncing was like and to see how much it hurt my back. And just to get an idea of what George Russell and Lewis Hamilton were going through. So you'll find bits and bobs to do it, but you know, going back to the Drive to Survive effect. The great thing about Formula One is that the more you know about it, the more you want to know about it. And I certainly found this growing up. I mean, Dean and I, as the oldest hands in the boxes here, were pre-internet. We were looking at Formula One pre-internet. I know that seems ridiculous now, but I would comb the newspaper for that day's practice sessions or the previous day's qualifying sessions on a Sunday. And I'd look at all of this stuff, and this was all pre-internet. So the more I sort of found out, you know, why was it that Damon Hill was in this position? Why was it that Johnny Herbert was behind Mika Salo in the Lotus? Why was it that Olivier Griard in a Ligier was down wherever he was? And that's the same with the people who are attracted to Formula One with Drive to Survive, because they're coming at it from maybe a base where they don't know all the teams. They don't know Gunther Steiner. They don't know the Williams team or the backstory behind, I don't know, McLaren or Zach Brown or Lando Norris. And the more they're finding out about it, the more attractive they are. And that's the job that we have as putting together the pre-show and the post-show. And then Dean and Phil and his team, everybody at Formula One Management and Formula One TV have of doing the race coverage or the qualifying coverage or the practice coverage, the middle bit. You know, we do the beginning, we do the end, and then there's the middle bit in the end. But of course, that's becoming more complicated, isn't it? Because Formula One is doing so much of everything now that it goes across those boundaries. And the amazing job that Formula One's digital team do with bringing all of the unseen radio messages and little bits that might have got lost, and that services everybody, the broadcast partners and also people who are attracted by Drive to Survive, who just want every little bit of detail about Inspector Seb or Yuki Tsunoda doing something or one driver waving to another. You know, that's the amazing thing about the technology and the scope and the coverage we've got at the moment. We can tell all those stories.
Definitely. And as those casual fans become discerning fans, it's about continuing that journey for them. Once we've got them in, it's continuing to entertain and educate. And educating is something you have to do, Alex Jacques, obviously, for the laps, as Ted mentioned, you've got the pre and the post shows, but in the middle is the race. It's the juicy bit that we all tune in for, really. And you talk us through it. And I'm intrigued to know what it's like now working with a channel that takes highlights. Do you commentate the whole race? Do they chop it up? Do you only talk when you're told to talk? Talk me through a weekend for you.
It'd be brave if they told me to talk at certain times and shut up at others. No, we commentate that as live, so very little actually changes. And I think sometimes there's this misconception that it's edited and then we talk about it afterwards and then it's all polished in that regard. That wouldn't work with the time frame that they've got to turn around the show. So we have to lose about 30% of the race in terms of the broadcast agreement.
So much gold lost.
Yeah, but definitely not. Some days when you've had an off day and you're like, okay, 30% of that going in the bin is not the worst thing. And then when you've had a good day, you're like, oh, come on, the gold has been lost.
Put it in the show reel.
that changes the way you commentate. That's probably the biggest difference if you're commentating for highlights, is that you know that there are times to hang, maybe if there's a killer stat that explains why Lewis Hamilton's having a difficult season, you will hang that on a part of qualifying that is not going to be cut. And so you won't mention it in the first 8 minutes of Q1, for example. So you do adjust it that way because you know there's parts that have to make it in, but the rest of the time you're reacting like you would for a live broadcast. Because if you did it the other way, the viewer would instantly know. The great thing about Formula One, even if it's a casual fan, that piqued interest to, as Ted described, to put your head in the encyclopedia of this incredibly complex and dynamic sport. It's a really perceptive audience. And if you did it's a bit of an old reference, but if you were Mystic Meg about the commentary, people would twig immediately. People would go, because it becomes like the old match of the day thing. Can he beat 5 players and score? Well, you're preempting what's to come. So yeah, it's got to be as live for that authenticity, and then you've got to hope that you deliver the line that doesn't end up on the cutting room floor.
Oh, devastation all round. And just tell me, you are commentating sometimes remotely and sometimes at track at the moment.
Yeah, that's a legacy of not having much choice in the COVID years, where everything got remoted. When I was still with Formula One TV, doing a side channel called the Pit Lane channel, and we did every race remotely in 2020. And then 2021 with Channel 4, there was a little bit, some races are done from the brilliant Ealing studios, and some are done on the road, and you sometimes are talking to an iPad as your co-commentator, which you would think off the bat is absolutely impossible, and then you get into the swing of it and it's no different to talking to you now. You do have to have a rapport, and you do have to have someone with the experience of knowing when you're pausing for the effect. So for instance, if Lewis Hamilton has an amazing comeback drive at Silverstone next week and ends his winless streak, I might pause for the crowd. You need an experienced co-commentator to not immediately fill that with space. And so if you're doing a split commentary between 2 locations, you have to have trust in your broadcast partner.
I love the insight there, that already planning how perhaps you might be approaching the broadcast at Lewis Hamilton's home race in 10 days' time. Alex mentioned the remote element of broadcasting, and I feel perhaps, Dean, you were slightly forced into it by the global pandemic, but I'd love you to explain how F1 pivoted when the pandemic came about and how you have adapted your broadcast.
Alex sounds very chipper about remote commentary now. I'm sure I had conversations with him a few years back where he wasn't quite as chipper about doing it.
Changed his tune.
And came up with a lot of issues and problems why that wasn't the case. We were going to go to a remote operation, not to sort of forget that we also do timing for the event and, getting all the signals from the cars and telemetry and provide that to the team. So it's a big footprint. It's a big lot of people with sustainability goals and everything around that. It was always part of our, as sort of connectivity became a lot cheaper, it was part of our roadmap. We thought we had a few years to do it, and then we ended up with 7 weeks to do it. So yes, part of COVID, we were offered to go back to Austria to get our season up and running with a double header in Austria. But there was a big ceiling on sort of amount of people they wanted from the government. So we brought it forward and built a remote operation. Well, actually what we did is we kind of cut the broadcast center which we had in half, and left half at Biggin Hill and built that and had a really good 2 10 gig connectivity fibers to and from, and actually the new part was the part that we have at the track. So, and then we spent a weekend. So with the technical teams, we literally spent a weekend of working out who goes and who doesn't, and where to make that cut. And then it's a kind of slide rule of, oh, actually, no, because of connectivity issues, actually, we do need to move that to site. And we're still tweaking it now a little bit, actually. In fact, something has just moved back to the track, and something has just moved to Biggin Hill, where our media and technology centre. But I do remember that weekend well, of trying to work out where that break was, and splitting 2 people up who had sat next to each other for about 15 years, and now they very rarely see each other.
Surprised you haven't wiped that weekend from your memory, Dean. I'm sure it was fairly fraught.
I actually really remember it because it was a really hot weekend in that first lockdown. And there was some, sort of barbecues going on between my neighbours that I could smell, and I was walking around the garden having an argument with technical teams about where it should be. So I remember it really well.
Oh, the glamour of F1, hey?
Exactly. But it's been really successful. We haven't changed a great deal. As Alex said, we're doing commentary for F2, F3, Porsche Super Cup, some side F1 commentary as well. We're doing that sometimes on site, sometimes off site, depending what's the best sort of resource to do that. We came at it with 2 parts really, which was acquisition. So we don't have robot cameramen. So sending people out to cameramen, collect data and supply all that, and then curation of those products would happen at the Media and Technology Centre. So producers, directors, most of them are back at Biggin Hill. And then because of connectivity, because we're a UHD, HDR broadcaster with hundreds of camera feeds, and 150 mic sources, things like that. So there becomes a bottleneck of what you can send back. So some things are more efficient to do it on site, like our track mix and part of that. But you've been on it as well, Rosanna. You have a producer talk to you that is back at Biggin Hill, and I talk to the producers. I'm mostly on site in my role, and I talk to producers, and it's on a comms panel. It's like they're there, and I don't have an iPad or a picture of them, but I can imagine them really well.
Just pictures stuck up to remind yourself who you're talking to at each time.
Exactly, but very, very little delay, very little latency. We did Australia this year. I think we had a few little concerns what Australia would be like, because that was the first time we would experience that sort of delay. And it was absolutely fine, apart from probably very, very difficult for the teams going to work at 2 o'clock in the morning in a very wet, cold Biggin Hill, compared to where we were. So there was more cheering up than technical issues. But
and just in terms of, heaven forbid there was a problem, do you have support on site to pick up the pieces if you can't send it back to Biggin Hill?
We do. We have something that sounds very dramatic called a disaster recovery desk, our DR mode. And we test that regularly as well. I think we're doing a test in Austria, actually. So we do a full DR. So that is all our systems. That's our timing systems, our data systems, and, our traditional broadcast systems as well. And what we can do, so like I said, if we have a problem with one fiber line which runs one way, we can switch to a different fiber line, and they tend to sort of divert across the globe in different ways. So that's our first backup, really. If for any instance both those lines went down, we can do an operation from the track. There will be a few things missing. Hopefully we can hide that from the viewer, although Ted will probably highlight it. As he normally does.
He probably test you, pull the cable out just to check everything's still working.
But we have a switch over, which we can do it from the disaster recovery desk, and cut the whole program from there. And yeah, like I said, we've tested it out a few times. Works really well. The changeover is really good. And actually, like anything, that disaster recovery desk was supposed to be sitting there, lit, ready to go at a moment's notice. But like anything, if it sits there, it ends up doing other things. So we do all the press conferences from there. We do sometimes we do podiums quite often from there as well, because it's the directors on site, so can do things. We do sometimes opening shows and some grid elements as well to it. So yeah, it actually gets used quite a lot now.
Yeah, being very efficient. Ted, I'm interested to know how Sky go about things. There's a lot of bodies on the ground, but I imagine there are a lot of people back at base as well. And have you seen your director this year, or is that very much speaking in your ear and you don't actually see them at the moment?
No, I haven't. I mean, this is a whole different subject. By the way, if there are different subjects you want to ask us questions about, Rosanna, I think, do people
We've
go
got
to
questions.
the Q&A?
I wanted to ask just about your setup, and then I've got a question that I'm going to put to you.
Right, but is there a certain button people have to press? I think at the bottom of your
just
Zoom.
Down at the bottom,
Q&A.
you might have, it might say more, or it might say Q&A. Click on there, and we've got a few questions
ask us your
ready
questions.
to go.
No, we started doing this, obviously. Sky has a commitment not only to be a carbon neutral production, we're Albert certified, but also Sky Zero is a big drive to be completely carbon neutral broadcaster, which Sky has been leading the way on. And it was just unsustainable. It was unsustainable to start air freighting, to continue air freighting all the vision mixing, the directing desk, the sound desk, the sound producers, the vision control, the VT. And so we were kind of similar, but on a smaller scale to Formula One. I mean, obviously you need, when you're at the track, you need the cameramen, you need the sound women, you need the camera, the sound people, and you need the people who actually need to see the cars, and more or less everybody else who doesn't need to be there, who would normally just be in a TV compound and not having to be there, can be then transported somewhere else. And it was only, as Dean says, the connectivity restraint that was then lifted with the advent of improved technology and bigger fibers, essentially, that made it possible. And the first time I tried it, I remember it was pre-pandemic, so we were doing this before COVID at Sky. I think it was 2018 or 2019, and I put my headset on, expecting to hear my director back in London when I was in Melbourne with a load of seconds delay, and I was amazed, absolutely amazed, at how good it was and how the delay was minimal. And it's just been easy since then. And sure, you know, you get the odd issue if the lines go down or you can't hear people, but there are, as Dean says, various disaster recovery scenarios where you barely notice about it. And you know, if something happens where people can't hear some audio for a while, of course you have to apologize to your viewers. If there's been a power cut and they lose something, you need to say, I'm sorry, we had a power cut, you know, we're back with you. But no, it's been incredible. And the amount of air miles, the amount of CO2, the amount of you know, it wasn't good for the environment to be transporting all of this stuff, air freight, around the world. So we have sea freight for everything that we need to have. We're like, the Sky is like the teams. We have 5 sets of office chairs, of desks, of heavy equipment, of cables, of antennas that get shipped around the world for the flyaways, that we can't use a truck to get them to the European venues. So we're like the teams, and that's how we aim to hit the Sky's very advanced sustainability targets.
I'm always intrigued as to the route of the freight, how it's maybe being packed up in Melbourne and being sent to Baku, or it doesn't even mirror the calendar. I just love it working, and I can't even imagine the logistics job on all of that. So fantastic insight there. Thank you for that, Ted. Well, let's go to our Q&A then. And Air Thomas has been in touch. How do you stay neutral in your commentary and not show your own team or driver preference? So Alex, over to you on this one. As a British commentator, do you have to keep a lid on the enthusiasm when a Lando or a George or a Lewis is doing well?
No, it becomes a different thing. You as soon as you cover it professionally, it immediately changes in your head. And then there's the human element of the people that you speak to in the paddock and the people that you might have seen come up the ladder. But no, there's a point of principle there whereby it's your job to tell the story, not to say what you think. So you're telling that, certainly from a commentary point of view, you're doing the play-by-play, you're giving the information, and it's the job of those who've been there and done that to, in the immediacy of the commentary, to give their opinion. So great example is Silverstone last year. It's a 50-50. It's Lewis Hamilton versus Max Verstappen into Copse Corner. I immediately throw it to David Coulthard, and then I immediately throw it to Mark Webber, because their opinion carries weight and they've got experience and they've risked their necks to do it. And then you get to the point where Ted provides later information on the Sky broadcast after the race with the reaction of what everyone said. But the bias, it melts pretty quickly, because if you start point scoring and you start favoring one or the other, again, you get found out pretty quickly by the audience, and that's just not what you're paid to do.
Yeah, storytellers all round. What about you, Ted? Has there been ever a moment where you've had to dumb the emotions down and have a moment when you've left the track, go home?
Such a simple answer to this. I don't care. I do not care. I don't care who wins and who loses. I do not care. And do you know what? That makes it so liberating. You know, when I was a kid and I liked Nigel Mansell, I liked Ayrton Senna, I cared. I would turn on the TV and I would be, come on, Ayrton, you know, and I was happy when Nigel won his championship in Hungary in '92. And I used to get nervous at the start of a race. My heartbeat used to go up, and I was nervous that my favorite driver would do well. And it's such a release if you just don't care. And I'm as calm now when I'm watching the start of a race. It's like, well, you know, we're going to have a good day, whatever happens. As long as we don't fall off air, then us on Sky and we tell the story, then we've had a good day. It doesn't matter to us whether he wins or she wins. It doesn't matter. So, and also, you know, I take the view of Murray Walker as well. I was lucky enough to work for Murray as his commentary box spotter and helper, and with Martin between sort of 97 and 01 for ITV. And you would never tell. I think Murray did like some drivers more than others. He was close to, obviously, Damon Hill because he knew his dad, Graham, and maybe he didn't like the way other people came to their motor racing. But you would never know. You would never know that Murray thought what Murray thought. And if some driver had done something silly or naughty or a bit close to the line, he'd be like, oh, well, you know, I'm sure they'll get a penalty if that's what's coming. So you know, you just don't. If you don't mind what's going on, then it's a release. And the way you approach it, I don't know if you're the same, Alex, but you approach it from the view of what would the fan want to know. So, for example, you referenced Max Verstappen coming together with Lewis Hamilton at Silverstone last year, and I didn't really have either way. Maybe Lewis kept his nose in, maybe Max turned in. Well, I don't know. But then, but then I went to talk to Christian Horner afterwards, and he was, you know, essentially saying that Lewis kept his nose in. Lewis knew exactly what he was doing. Lewis effectively, while he might not have did it deliberately, or Horner didn't say that Lewis did it deliberately, he certainly did not avoid having an accident. And people kind of call me out on and saying, why didn't you go into Horner more for rebutting what he was saying? Well, it's not really my job to rebut that. If he wants to say that, then he wants to say it. What I could have said perhaps is, you know, well, steady on, Christian, you know, is Lewis the kind of person to do that? But I don't know. Maybe Lewis did, maybe Lewis didn't. It's not my point, not my department to have a view on any of this or any of these people. I'm just there to ask the questions, and ask the questions that if I was sat at that on that sofa as a kid when I was watching in 1992 to 1994, I would want the questions asked. And that is always the position that I take it. What would I want asked if I was a fan sitting at home?
Yeah, a great way to approach it. I think some journalists perhaps go in a little bit accusational. And I feel that what you both do is very good to stand back, look at the bigger picture, and as you say, ask the questions the fans want to hear. Don't hold them to account in a sort of aggressive way. We've got some technical questions now, Dean. So
good.
Get ready. Some of this I don't even understand. So if I read it out wrong, please correct me. So TJ Heidemann has said a nerdy technical question. So I've alerted you to that. So are you running your infrastructure in 2110? I'm using that as Nokia speak. It sounds a bit like my old phone. And are your signals uncompressed, or have you adopted JPEG XS, extra small, not a size I usually take, or some other compression?
Well, I'm happy to say I can't answer any of those. Actually, I don't think we are doing the JPEG. And do we have a mixture of compressed and uncompressed signals? I know that.
I've got more questions. Hang on. We'd love to hear more about the layers of production required to create the output product, track mix plus replay plus graphics, etc., and the deliverables the FIA sends to their partners. But I'm imagining more FOM, not FIA, sends to their partners like Sky and ESPN.
I can answer that.
Yes, I thought that might be another part.
So although I run at the engineering division, doesn't make you necessarily an engineer, obviously. But so I'm happy to get the answers to those. But yeah, I can answer the mixture of compressed and uncompressed, depending, on what the source is. Like I said to you before, we have so many sources now. I actually I did Wednesday till Friday in Imola, then went back to Biggin Hill on the Saturday. And I walked in and, I haven't been in there since Qatar last year. And it had grown again, and there was even more signals and even more, a huge activity going on. So it just grows all the time, and the amount of signals is incredible, like 150 odd feeds, I think there is. But to answer the slightly less technical question, we do a very layered broadcast. That's very true. We do submixes. And when we started doing this, but I'll try and make it a short story, but I got loaned to Indianapolis Motor Speedway when they first got the rights and covered the Formula One with IMSP Productions. And we were given an OB truck and a mix of some F1 crew and some American crew that we sourced from IndyCar. But it was quite a simple setup, and we built it as a very simple setup with submixes. So there was a director who did the onboard camera mix, who passed that to the director. There was a director who did a track mix, who also passed that to the main director. As they all said, ISO cameras and replays. We have a lot of action happening simultaneously all around the track, and we can only tend to be on one subject at a time. So we are more based on replays potentially than something like football or a stadium sport. So we have an ISO director. So there's layers of submixes that all go into the final the final product, which the main director does. I did that for a little while, and then we have a couple of directors that do it now. And they will take. It's not just who shouts loudest. They will sort of pick which part they should be and which part they shouldn't. There's an editorial director as well, guiding them through that journey. And we feel that those people are responsible. So when you take the onboard mix, an example, it's got audio on it, it's been color corrected, it's working fine, and you can take it. And that's how we did it. And like I said, I started doing that in America in this OB truck, and when we were then asked to do the host 2 or 3 years later, we used that model. It's hugely much bigger now with lots more producers in back rows and all sorts. But it is very much a layered broadcast.
And is it almost like a menu that some of the broadcasters can say, we would like this bit, but can you not send that particular layer? Or does it not get that granular?
Yeah, we have different broadcasters with different requirements. So, Ted and the Sky team have a channel. So they have this big hunger for content and everything they want. They're very creative. So I think I saw an email from Ted's producer only this morning requiring a multiple list of things for Silverstone. They do require, whether that's use of our cable camera or extra ISOs or some extra feeds that we most of the time we provide. We use some of our sort of digital receiver that they can go around the track and use on Friday when Martin can look at the track. So we're happy to, we're all about making we're Formula One. We want to make the product the best it possibly can be and exciting. So if a broadcaster comes to us and wants to do something that we feel is going to benefit the fans and make that a good broadcast, like I said, I think we're at the top end of broadcasting around the world and sports broadcasting anyway. We're going to help them with that. So we also, there's only so much we can fire at them through the world feed, as we call it. As Ted put it, once they finish their beginning and their end, the bit in the middle, once we finish that, we only have so many ways we can do that. So we also have something called F1 Insights, which is a clip-based service which broadcasters can go in and take the rare bit of team radio we weren't able to get out for various reasons, or some analysis that we're able to do because we've got some really clever data that we have within, and that's a service. And that was a service we launched, I don't know, about 7-8 years ago. And I think it had about 4 broadcasters taking it, and now I think there's 62 or something, all taking, and gets, you know, and there's 4,000 clips put on there across the year. So yeah, we're trying to make those products and trying to make those broadcasts such a spectacle and as good as possible. So yeah, we're there to support our broadcast partners as much as possible, but we also do get some requests where we have to say no.
Are they Ted's requests?
I think they come directly from Ted.
Well, I've got a question directly for Ted, a couple of questions actually. One from Sophie asking, Ted, do you know how many pages you've written on in your notebooks over the years? And when are you bringing out your own line of notebooks? I think there's a definite little marketing opportunity here.
Well, the second part of that question is a question for Sky, who have an IP interest, and but if they can get together with Formula One merchandise, we can sell. They're very happy. I'm happy for them to sell some Ted's notebooks on the merchandise stalls if they get really desperate.
They would be flying off the shelf, Ted. But, don't be ridiculous.
That's a conversation between Sky and Formula One and Stefano, so Domenicali. So yeah, I'll leave that up to them.
Love it. And then second question for you from Jeremy Cal.
How many questions? No. How many pages?
Oh yes,
well,
yes.
Happily, to keep costs down, my notebooks are supplied by the official tyre supplier of Formula One, Pirelli. So grazie Pirelli for giving me the notebooks. They have a little stand inside their motorhome where they allow people to take notebooks. So it's the perfect size to fit in the back pocket of my shorts or trousers. So please, Pirelli, don't stop doing your notebooks. And I get through maybe one every 5 races. So I'll have 4 notebooks per year, something like that. I either keep them or throw them in the nearest sort of bin, paper recycling bin at a circuit when I'm done with them. So people ask me what I do with my notebooks at the end of it. More often than not, they end up in a recycling bin at the circuit.
We'll be race 10 this week in Silverstone. So I'm imagining people diving into the recycling bins.
I do need a new one. You're absolutely right. You're right. I do need a new one. I got to the end of it.
I think you should throw it into the crowd.
No. There's all sorts of secrets in there. It's better just sent to the recyclers. Sorry, you had another one.
Great question from Sophie. We had another one in from Jeremy. Thank you so much to all of you putting your questions in the Q&A box. So another question for you, Ted. The features that you do, like the Tifosi piece in Imola, are they your ideas or from the production team? Be honest. What's the split? I'm sure you take control of most of it.
They are. How did you know, Rosanna? Yes, they are.
You're the brains.
They are 80%. I would say 80 to 90% my ideas. So the what it's like to be a Tifosi piece in Imola. I mean, part of it comes from the venue that you're at. So you wouldn't do that piece in Austria or Hungary, for example. But Imola obviously is the. I've got to say this correctly. Sorry for my Italian pronunciation. Autodromo, or maybe it's Autodromo. Enzo and Dino Ferrari, and being the home race of Ferrari. The year before, I'd done a piece on the history of Ferrari, and I started that piece by saying, we all know Ferrari is special, but you might not know about the history of Ferrari, who it is, and the history behind Enzo Ferrari, etc., etc. We went between Maranello and Modena and stuff like that. And then this year, I thought, well, hang on, that was a very throwaway line I started that piece with. We all know Ferrari is special. Why? Why is it special, and why is it particularly special for the people who follow it, the fans, the Tifosi? And so was born a new idea for a piece about what made Ferrari special. And we got in touch with Ferrari very kindly. They lent us a SF90 Spider, their most expensive £500,000 model car, top of the range. I was terrified driving it around the streets of Maranello and Modena, seeing as I'd signed a waiver saying that anything that had happened to it, I would be on the hook for £500,000, and drove it very carefully, having been treated terribly by other drivers on the road in Italy. Did you know this, guys? In Italy, I mean, I'm used to seeing, you see a Ferrari on the road in the UK, you think, oh, bravo you, amazing treat you well. I
Who
mean,
and all?
I had delivery drivers, people in little Fiat 500s cutting me up in a Ferrari and
It
treating me
wasn't the
terribly.
Ferrari, Ted. It wasn't that.
Oh, it was
back
me.
then.
It was they knew me. So anyway, so yeah, we did that piece, and I had an idea that we're doing for Silverstone after George Russell, who had gone from a Williams to a Mercedes in Bahrain a couple of years ago, and he did amazingly well. And I heard the phrase, "God, that George Russell, he can drive anything." There's an idea. Can he? Can he really drive anything? Can he drive a milk float? Can he drive a fire engine? Can he drive an ambulance? Can he drive a tractor? Can he drive a little electric scooter? So there you go. So there's another idea, and that's a piece that Johnny Herbert's doing for Silverstone next week. A little preview for you there. So
Lovely.
yeah,
All the exclusives here.
Yeah, so they come to me. Yeah, it's 80 or 90% my ideas, and then 10% the production will have an idea, and I'll pick it up.
Team effort, taking it on. Is there an ice cream van in that feature?
Yes, there is.
That's my best friend's ice cream van. There we go.
Is it that George Russell drove?
Yeah, she said to me, my ice cream van's been taken to Silverstone by Sky for something. I don't know what they're doing. And I was like, oh, I don't know. Maybe they're serving ice creams. Anyway, who knew? Well, that's a great insight to the production values and ideas behind Ted's awesome content that we see every weekend. So I've got another question, got many questions here. Anthony Hay has asked about Drive to Survive. So to what extent does the success of Drive to Survive, a dramatized depiction of F1 and very popular for it, add to the pressures on F1 to straddle the line between sporting event and entertainment product? And I'm actually, Jakesy, I'm going to come to you on this because I can imagine there's quite a bit of pressure to make sure you're coming up with some commentary gold for Drive to Survive. Will you make it in as the person narrating a key moment? Or is there a little bit of touching up in post that we perhaps don't know about?
I might have signed an NDA, which means I can't go into details about that. I might not. Who can remember what happened in January earlier this year? You have a little bit of, sometimes with the highlights, you come under a little bit of pressure to make life easier for your editors and to extend that beyond to Drive to Survive. Yeah, that it's useful if you can pause every once in a while. It's usually useful if you can give them a good out. And there's always like a big headline, a big billboard line when there's a dramatic moment, when there's a clash between two rivals, when there's a move to win the race. So there's not pressure on it. I've seen football commentators talk about scripting lines. Yeah, if you try to shoehorn things in, you can, I don't know, I'd worry about trying to tick lines off a piece of paper. So I think the best stuff I think is off the top of your head. And it then means that, you know, the rare days where you do get that right, it's a little bit more rewarding as well.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about Drive to Survive and how we straddle the line between sporting event and entertainment product. Dean, I imagine you were there right at the beginning of when it was sort of conceptualized, Drive to Survive. What was the aim of it at that point, and how has it changed, do you think, in the past seasons that we've seen?
I think it's a little bit what Ted said earlier. Once you delve into Formula One, you know it's this huge world with, and sometimes it's the activity between races, which is just as interesting and just as dynamic of what happens over the race. And, you know, traditionally we cover things over a race weekend, don't we, with a little bit of extra sort of day before and Monday afterwards on some of our broadcast partners. So it was an interesting concept. So how could they take our footage, add with their sort of behind the scenes footage, and we shoot some stuff for them as well. But how could they do it without that kind of time constraint? So they don't have to follow a time narrative. They can edit a race 3 months down the line, and we've sort of now look at it at a different angle because it's done that, which I don't know where I'm jealous of actually. Sometimes I'm not really, but they do an incredible job of that, and they definitely look at it through a different lens, which I think was really important for Formula One. And you know, and it tied in, you know, with people watching box sets and really getting into that way of watching. So it does really well. And I really enjoy it. When you're at the event and then you see that event covered, sometimes you think, really, I didn't notice that at all. I didn't see that, which can be a bit strange. But I just think it was really, really interesting how they took it and box to box, what they did with that lens and the producers. And what they, I found it quite fascinating, really. And it's interesting how they can tell a different story without that time narrative that we have to. There's a start of a weekend and an end of a weekend, and they've had some brilliant championships. Last year was one of the best championships on record, went all the way to the last lap, and I think we were able to sort of provide them with all that content in there, really. But yeah, and they've made stars of people, haven't they? The team principals have become stars. One of our problems is we only actually have 20 athletes. We only have 20 drivers in Formula One. It's not like football where you have hundreds and American sports. So everybody's looking for their time. Everybody wants a piece of that. So actually, making more out of strategists and team principals, these hugely intelligent and skilled people have just brought more narrative in it and brought them in it, and and broadcasters have also sort of jumped on that. Sky and Ted's team do an awful lot with team principals live in session and things like that. We do a lot now with them, so I think it's a two-way where box to box and Drive to Survive can take elements from the live and go, oh wow, that's really good the way they do that radio, we're going to, or that shot, we're going to do that, and we can take a little bit from them as well.
Yeah, it's a great series. If you haven't watched it, get into it, enjoy it. You've probably got time to digest it all before the next series comes out at the beginning of next year. I just want to sort of step back and look at the landscape now, because we've obviously got a subscription, we've got free to air, we've got F1 TV and F1 Live, however you like to sort of refer to it as. What do we feel the future is going to look like? And Dean, perhaps you might just guide us a little on what we can expect on how we can consume Formula One in the future.
I think it's the trajectory we're on now, and there is a careful mix of free to air. This, in the UK, is a great example of that, really. So it's a very careful. Ian Holmes and our media rights teams is, firstly, they're getting more content out there. So working with Sky, to say, look, on our digital platforms, we're going to put this. It's going to lead people to your channels as well to watch things, and vice versa. The same way, using the UK model. And I think in some other areas where, we haven't had such active broadcast partners, or we want to do a little bit more, we have the F1 TV or F1 Live offering as well, for a hardcore fan as well, as it's, a lot of it, but it's not just the hardcore fan anymore, I think now. It's just making it easy to watch and, available, really. It's available in whichever way you want it. If you're, strictly a Drive to Survive, which we hope you then tune in at the weekend to watch it as a live event, whether you're a highlights and live, it's making available. So I think it's very much the trajectory we're on. But I think we're looking at really active broadcast partners, so the Skies across Europe, and some of the new ones in Holland that we've got, and we got a new broadcaster in Brazil. We just want them to be active and come on that journey with us and make it available.
Unmute myself. You talk about active broadcasters. Of course, Sky Sports F1 is one of those. And we've had a question from Cindy. Ted, I'm going to ask you this one. Is there anything that you could share with us about broadcasters' future plans to reach new F1 viewers? And also, is there a commitment to reach a diverse audience as well from Sky?
No, absolutely. It is happening, and it's happening very quickly. It's a top priority for Sky TV, for Sky Sports. We've committed an awful lot of money, £1 million into Lewis Hamilton and his Accelerate scheme, and getting more involvement from underserved people from underserved backgrounds into Formula One. And Lewis has got so much, can take so much credit in just using his platform to say to people, because he's right. Remember what he said a few years ago. Formula One has been, throughout the 70s, 80s, even 90s, predominantly white, predominantly middle to sort of class, sport. that was underserving its audience, and there's been such a change, and it's happening so quickly, and it's so good to see. We're doing a lot of work for Silverstone. You'll see this weekend there's a lot of work and on-screen result of which you'll see, which is reaching communities that weren't served particularly well by Formula One, and it is changing. It really is changing. I can feel it in the people who are watching Formula One, the people who are messaging me, who are getting in touch, people I see in the street. There's a much more diverse audience for Formula One that I never really saw in the sort of mid-90s, late 90s and 2000s. And that's reflected in the people working in Formula One, the drivers getting into it, young karters, people interested in engineering, in science, in technology and maths at schools. So, you know, all of this attention, all of the money, all of the effort, it is getting somewhere. It is going to take a few more years, but we are getting there, and it's really exciting.
Yeah, and fittingly, you mentioned all of that on International Women in Engineering Day, 23rd of June. How fitting is that? Today is that particular day. So it's great to see, as you say, both the audience and the members working in motorsport and Formula One becoming ever more diverse, which is exactly what we want and need. Right, a few more questions, because we're approaching 60 minutes. Time flies when you're having fun, I have to say. So I've got a question for Dean. I think is probably going to have the answer on this one. I'm going to shorten the question up a little bit. It's from John. The main theme here is, will we ever see the return of the FIA team radio messages?
I've put it on my birthday list to certainly get it back. We haven't actually been fully cut off from FIA team radio, but they're not actually talking on the line that we currently get. I think, you know, Alex and Ted probably agree. We wouldn't have been able to tell the story of last year in Saudi Arabia and Abu Dhabi without that FIA team radio. It would have been a very half story told, I think, without that. So whilst it came across quite sensational at times, it was also just a vehicle of understanding what was going on, and that is quite difficult. Even if you have all the data and everything in front of you, it's still quite confusing sometimes. So I would like to say it will come back. I think that, you know, the FIA are doing some restructuring and elements of that, and the way that with their stewards as well. And I think once that gets settled, I would hope that we will get some element of that team radio back. And as I said, that's not from a sensational point. That is actually just helping us to understand the decisions and the processes of what's going on, and to understand the huge job that they've got to make these decisions incredibly instantly. You know, they don't get a pause. They don't get a pause in play. Very, very seldom do they do that unless it's the car stopped in the pit lane. They have to make decisions incredibly quickly, and really, really important decisions. You know, whether it's right to bring the safety car back in, and sometimes the track can look drier than it actually is on a certain turn, or things like that. So it's also sort of justified those reasons and explained them a lot better. So yes, it's very much my birthday list, and I'm, you know, pressing ahead to get it back.
Well, I think on my birthday list is the 3-box PLC. Craig also potentially has that on his birthday list. He's asked, why has it been dropped, the 3-box pit lane channel? Was it because Jakesy's gone to Channel 4 and therefore we don't need it anymore? Or is there another reason?
He owned the 3 boxes, and he took them, and he took them with them. It's probably behind
3
him
cardboard boxes
in that room. Yes. The pit lane channel was an offering to some of our sort of key broadcast partners. We also had it on F1 TV. It had a good fan base, actually, because it told multiple stories. You know, like I said, 2 to 3 box, extra graphics, extra data. Alex dug deep into the depths of the Formula One, because they were really targeting a hardcore fan. We decided to change it, and it's F1 Live. And it still has a 2-box, actually. And quite often when I'm watching it, or if I'm in the gallery and I have it on one of the screens, like, oh, he's gone to the 2-box again. I told him not to do that. And I think it works. It does work. So there is a 2-box, 3-box, you know, sort of operation around that. I think, you know, No offense, Alex, some of the commentary is still very good, and still, even, you know, Alex taught them well and trains them up well, but they're still doing a really good job. And we've got, you know, people like Ben Edwards, who was before Alex on Channel 4 as well. So you know, we're very, very lucky with that. And we've had Jolien Palmer, yourself, Rosanna, in there.
Yeah, the 3 box was a gift for me, it has to be said. It was a crutch. All 3 of those boxes were crutches for me.
And I think it's finding that balance. So it is still there as F1 Live, and it is still doing a little bit more in depth and some areas around that. But yeah, we and actually the broadcasters still get a pit lane channel. So it is available on Sky, on the Sky Press Red, or however, you know, Sky Race Control, isn't it, Ted? I think.
Yep.
It's still available there. It's a slightly automated version of what we had before. But yeah, Alex took the 3 boxes with him, and we're looking to save up to replace them.
Get them back. Well, let's wrap this up and just look ahead to the British Grand Prix, where Channel 4 will be live, Sky Sports F1 will be live. The 2 can happily coexist. So what does that weekend look like from a broadcasting point of view for you now, Alex? You have to change your schedule a little.
Yeah, I have to bring my A game. There's no
You so
tidying
much of it on our panel. You don't have any of it left, mate.
Yes, it's a completely different broadcast for Silverstone. It's our only live race of the year. There are more trucks in the TV compound, and we're on as much as we possibly could be throughout the weekend. We've got W Series live as well, and yeah, I think it just brings an elevated intensity for everyone on the team, and thoroughly looking forward to it, because there's something about going back to Silverstone which just lends itself to be a festival of motor racing. So if you were going to choose to have one live one a year, I think we're very lucky to get Silverstone.
So we get a menu request not only from Sky on that race, we also get it from Channel 14.
But when he says about the trucks, be under no illusion, that's an RV for Alex Jacques in his green room.
I wish it was. I wish it was. You've seen the conditions of the glamorous porter cabins we have, Tennant.
This year they've been fully air conditioned, and I've been loving it, I have to say. Ted, what about you? You've given us a little sneak preview in terms of what to look out for with George Russell driving every single vehicle under the sun. What are you going to be doing? You're going to be out with the fans as well, getting amongst it in the campsite?
Yeah, absolutely. Silverstone is always a massive weekend for us. I mean, we try to approach every Sunday as our own sort of cup final. We have a sort of hidden mantra in Sky Sports F1, which is make Sunday special, which is hard, isn't it? Because, you know, heaven knows we've got Friday now, which is a very, very long day. Starts with a press conference in the morning. Then there's free practice 1 and free practice 2. And by the end of Friday, everyone's a bit knackered. Then there's the story of Saturday. And then when it gets to Sunday, you know, everyone's kind of, oh, you know, it's Sunday. So it's quite hard physically, mentally, to actually build yourself up to make Sunday special. But we really try and do that. I mean, we don't have a huddle and a big high five at the beginning of Sunday, but we might as well. Mentally, we do. And so Silverstone is just that, you know, times by 100, really. We'll be out there. We'll be in the camping. We'll be amongst the fans. We'll be amongst the hospitality. We'll be amongst the teams. We've got something planned on the starting gantry. We're going to be on the grid. We'll be covering as much as we possibly can. It looks like it's going to be a great Silverstone. Mercedes hopefully are going to be back in the mix, bumping and porpoising allowed, bouncing allowed. We've got Ferrari who need to strike back. It's a great season this year with Red Bull as well, and Channel 4 being live as well, you know, and that's it. Channel 4 are Sky's partners. You know, we're all just as much as, you know, we ask for Dean's Formula One guys and his help with stuff, as he's absolutely right. We're there to help them make Formula One and show Formula One as the best sport in the world that we know and we love, and we're there to celebrate it. And Channel 4 being live is just great for us as well. They're our partners, and we love it when they're live. It's all just, you know, great for us. And then we've got Austria, France. We're in the middle of this sort of European season. Then there's the summer break, and that's when the championship will start to get slightly more interesting. And just for the sake of, you know, sporting equity. You know, it seems that Max Verstappen's running away with it at the moment. I predict it won't be that simple for him. I think we're going to see Ferrari back in there. I think we're going to see Mercedes back in there making a three-way fight. And that's all we want, isn't it? It's an exciting end to the season. Maybe not quite Abu Dhabi last year. My blood pressure can't take that again. But yeah, something good to wrap up with once we get us from September to November.
Plenty to look forward to. So many more races coming our way, and of course the British Grand Prix up next. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. I'm sorry we haven't been able to answer all the questions, but I think just over an hour's worth of insight from you experts has been brilliant on this Thursday evening. Thank you so much to everyone for joining. As I said at the beginning, we are recording everything you have seen and heard this evening, so it will be on the website. And if you would like to join, head to www.rts.org.uk to become part of the Royal Television Society. And thank you again to RTS East and RTS Midlands for making this possible, a joint venture by them. And thank you to our panelists, Ted Kravitz, Alex Jacques and Dean Locke. Very good evening to you all, and hopefully might see each other at the British Grand Prix. Goodbye.